big is this? It's the smallest I've ever drawn it. This must be bigger. It's so small. Oops. Wait. Yes, I've got many more NPCs to design. Hey, Kels! Hi, Bruno! Oh, let me move my mic so that I can also talk while I am looking the other way. Yeah, I do really like this brush, for, like, sketching and doing line work. It's got, like, the right amount of, like, texture, and it also has a really good range of, like, pressure, sensitivity when it comes to, like, size. So it's pretty versatile. I do find myself kind of, like, nitpicking a lot when I use it. My line art can get pretty thin, but, I enjoy the, like, slight textured aspect to it, so I very much enjoy using it, and it's the main reason why I'm using Clip Studio Paint nowadays, just because this brush is really fun. Hey, Sparrow! Hey, Miri! Meaning to ask you this, I'm not sure how to approach it myself. Did you copy a lot from reference when you were learning to draw characters, such as how folds work and whatnot? Yeah, I mean, I think there's a degree to which you kind of have to use reference. As much as I think we would like to believe that you could use your maybe like normal human experience to then go on to draw human things, right? Like you think like, oh, well, I've been wearing clothes all my life. Obviously, I know how to dress a character. Obviously, I should know how to draw folds. But to actually draw something is like it's a completely different way of framing objects that you have known for most of your life. So it is absolutely crucial, especially if you're not used to it or you're still learning, to be using reference like all the time. And there was absolutely a time in my life where I was using way more reference. I was looking up, photos. I really recommend using photos and not concepts or like illustrations other people have done. It's a lot more, I think, in the long term, a lot more helpful to get used to using photo references over interpretations that other people have done. Because once you get into the stage of like doing like style stuff, like stylistic choices and things, that's when you can kind of look at other people's kind of approach to it. But if you're just learning, use reference as that kind of baseline to teach you all the things about drawing, anything, before you try to like do it from memory or even from like a visual library. Especially when it comes to like folds, that's a very like technical thing that it's not easy to like logic out that kind of stuff until you've actually physically done some master copies or some pieces that are heavily referenced to understand like, oh, this type of fold appears very often when it's this type of fabric that's overlapping an arm, or it's this configuration of things has to happen in order for this to show up, or this is typically how light interacts with this format of folds and curves and wrapping and all that kind of stuff. So I think folds in particular are a very important thing to reference, especially when you don't really have a frame of reference for that kind of stuff in your own head automatically. There's no shame in actually like just making sure that you got it right. And I think it's very important to do that, especially when you're not comfortable with it from the get-go. Do I have pen pressure settings on? Yes. I believe Clip Studio should automatically check if you have pen pressure on. If it doesn't show that, then you should double check whether or not your tablet's getting, or is being, detected, I guess. Source the brush. It's one of the G Pen. It's one of these. It's one of the G Pen brushes that are on the Clip Studio site. It's all free, but I don't remember which one this came from. I think it's this one. I think this is probably, or any of these. I don't read Japanese. Any of these could probably work, but if you just look up, like, I think there's a category just for like popular brushes. I'm sure it's one of them. It's been around for years. Yeah, I've been enjoying drawing in Clip Studio, so using Clip Studio. I feel like people are always like very curious as to why I switch programs, when really the only reason every time I do it is just because I felt like it. So, hey, I made this decision to use Clip Studio Paint like 3 minutes ago. Sorry, no, 11 minutes ago. So, it's truly not that deep of a decision. There is no greater conspiracy, I promise. Or is there? Is it better to do photo studies just for the purpose of learning something, or best to study when you need to apply it to your own piece? I think it depends, right? I think for some people, learning when you need to is easier for them to kind of compartmentalize this kind of, it's like a lot of stuff at some point that you need to learn, need to work on. So I think taking it one at a time, or even just focusing on things as they become relevant to you, is not a bad way to go about learning. And I think ultimately it's probably how I went about it as well, just because when you're younger, you're not thinking about like, I should learn this for the greater, longevity of my career. It's like, I really want to do fan art of my favorite character, or I want to make this OC that does something, but I've never had to draw like a weapon before. Let me go look up what that means, right? So I think it really just does depend on what you're comfortable with. Like when you come up with a new idea, or really need to make that smaller. When you have to like try something, like if you're making a portfolio and you suddenly realize like, I need to learn how to draw hard surface things. Like, even just learning how to draw like a suitcase is like, that's hard surface compared to drawing characters with clothes. and you suddenly realize like there's so much I need to learn and unpack from that. So starting with photos really sets you in a space of like, okay, I need to learn the basic real objects that these things come from, and then I can get to the space where I can dream about all the ways I can make this more fantastical or more specific to my project, or really start to invent from there. I think however you choose to do that works. I don't really think you have to follow someone else's experience, but I think for me, because I was doing a lot of this stuff while I was still in like middle school, high school, my brain was like, path of least resistance. I'm absolutely not gonna worry about this until I have to, and now I've had to for work, and it's like, hey, we need you to do this thing that we didn't hire you to do, but we need you to do this, and it's like, oh, cool, okay, let me just take time outside of work to quickly learn this skill because I just completely didn't think I would need to, but here I am now. But anyways, getting back to your question, photo studies are, I think, the way to go for most things if you're trying to figure out how to draw them. I think they're just good. They're always good. Hey, Cole. Yeah, I think it's really it's a weird misconception. I feel like that people are like, I just need to learn it once and then I'll never have to learn it again, right? It's like, no, you will forget. That's like just a part of being human. You'll like forget some things that you learned and really remember other things. That's where you get people who are really good at drawing like something specific, but then you ask them to expand and it's like, I know I learned this at some point, I'm just not comfortable with it didn't click with me. So many things that you will eventually forget, even though you spent time trying to put it in your brain and really interpret it. You're just gonna naturally gravitate towards certain things that interest you or you feel like made a really big impact, and so now you'll always remember it. And then other stuff where it's like, I guess I'll fix it when I get there, So don't be too, I guess, like, harsh with yourself if you realize there's a lot that you thought you learned and then you don't remember. I think it's a very human experience for that to be the case. Hey, Crocopo! Hey, Mimi. How's Peach? Peach is good. She's been doing a lot of things for attention, so that's been interesting. Yeah. That's all I have to say on her. How's my week been? It's been pretty okay. This week was, I think, pretty much dominated by the fact that it's been raining a lot in Los Angeles and a lot of parts of California. And that rain resulted in some pretty bad water damage in my wall. And it was like a huge crack in the paint, and there was like mold, and the drywall was kind of cracked. It was pretty bad. Thankfully I live in an apartment, so I can call maintenance to then get someone to come by to fix it relatively quickly. So luckily it didn't end up being too bad, but it was pretty like stressful kind of being in this office, not knowing if I was like breathing in a bunch of mold, and my wall was like ripped open and dripping, and there was also water coming out of the outlet, so it was just kind of like, yo, I don't know if this is good or not. Thankfully we were able to get someone to come and evaluate it. It ended up being not as bad as we thought. It was a lot of shoddy work done before we moved in. They renovated this place, and I guess whoever did like the windows did a really bad job because there was a bunch of holes in it. The rain got in, that's how it got damaged. So the guy helped us kind of fix all of that, and then also fix the wall, so now it looks pristine, which is great because it was in my home office, and I did not want to not be able to use my computer and stuff. So we're fine now, but it was a little stressful, and I'm very thankful that the maintenance guy was like so good at what he did. He was very, very sweet and explained everything to us. So if I could like give him commendations to whoever he works for, I wish I could. He was really nice. But other than that, like, my week has been pretty quiet. I'm starting to wrap up the final elements of my D&D campaign that I'm hoping will go well. So I'm doing like session zeros and stuff very soon, and I'm very like nervous because there's a lot of things I've been trying to keep together. A lot of lore stuff that's like only now getting to a point where it's like, okay, this is relatively there. It's there, I think. So I'm really nervous. But you know, it's been a very nice second job that I've had, learning how to do all this stuff and like the philosophy of kind of circumventing or even just like guiding the social interaction that is D&D. So it's been fun. A lot of new stuff that I've learned, a lot of new respect for DMs, especially forever DMs, because I can't imagine doing this all the time. Like, this has literally become a second job for me. I don't know how people do this every single time they want to play D&D, but I'm very excited. Everyone's very excited. It's good. Very good. Yes, I'm looking forward to having fun playing this game with my friends. So, what's Tip Mania? Oh, interesting. Why? Wait, why would you need to speedrun it? How do you speedrun a rhythm game? Hey, Chrissy. Welcome, welcome. How do you actually study art from photos? I feel like a lot of the time I'm just copying the reference, not learning anything new. Good question. So I have this whole thing about learning from reference, right? Because I think for the most part, we're never actually told what it's supposed to do. We're kind of just told that it's something that's good to do and that you should do it, and that if you care about your development, right, like you should be doing X and X thing for X and X amount of time, but no one actually explains like what you're supposed to be getting out of it. So reference is helpful for many different reasons, and it comes down to really what are you trying to get out of it, right? It's not the act of making, or the act of using reference is not necessarily the point, it's why you're doing it, right? So trying to understand before you go into any study, trying to understand what you're kind of expecting to answer, the question that you have, or the kind of unknown variable that you're kind of trying to pinpoint. Going into a practice or a set of studies with a goal in mind will help make the process of studying from photos much more tangible, much more relevant. Because I feel like a lot of people go into studies just assuming that through osmosis or some kind of thing, you'll learn something. You'll get something out of it. You might just get better somehow, but there's no concrete aspect to it that makes a lot of sense or even has any tangible results, right? So the way that I recommend that people go into studies is kind of first framing it in a way that is specific and concrete, right? So much of art is very abstract. It's kind of why it's a, constantly evolving set of problems. But it helps when you are trying to answer a specific question, right? If you're trying to study faces, trying to get better at faces, it's much better to try to answer the question of how do I implement shades of gray within my art versus trying to answer the question of how do I paint skin, right? If you notice certain things like breaking down the forms of the face, it's a lot more, I think, objective to be asking where are the high points of the skull, where are the what is kind of the depth of the kind of the eye sockets and stuff, and how does that translate to when you're drawing a face, like how deep do your shadows have to go in order to communicate depth? Trying to find smaller questions to ask that then can lead you towards a much more tangible outcome allows you to evaluate whether or not the study that you're doing is actually genuinely useful. Because I think the act of doing a study is fine, but it's not really the process that's supposed to be helping you. It's a method by which you answer questions. So if you feel like you're copying the reference and not learning anything new, it's often, I feel like, because you don't go into it expecting to learn something. You're going into it hoping the process by doing it is going to give something back in return. It never will, though, because there's way too many abstract things that could have been useful to know or useful to learn, and they're not going to present themselves to you unless you tangibly understand what it is you want answered. And that will also change the way that you reference things, right? It doesn't make sense to do a full painting of a face if you're just trying to learn how to draw, eyes, or even eye bags, right? There's something very specific about how do you shade the underside of the eye, the kind of folds underneath. It's very specific to ask, how do I realistically shade hair? specifically in a certain light, specifically from a certain angle. It's not useful at that point to then try to like copy, a full body reference in that instance. I think some people try to take a study all the way, and they don't necessarily realize that doing so does not grant them better answers, more complete answers. So my general process for this kind of stuff has always been to try to narrow down what it is I'm actually trying to get out of this. Scope the process and the method by which I'm trying to learn this stuff, specifically so that it answers these questions or attempts to answer these questions, and then afterwards evaluate if I actually learned anything at all. That usually means I'll try to take that original premise for the study, right? I'm trying to learn how to paint with gray in skin tones. And I will, without using the reference or any of my notes or any of my whatever extra material that I used, I'll try to replicate the answers that I received. Try to implement the things that I supposedly learned in a whole new illustration or a whole new thing relevant to the study, completely out of context of like that learning mode, maybe a day or two afterwards. And I'll compare the two and I'll see like, what did I retain and then what did I not remember at all? And those are the things that you're supposed to kind of revise, remind yourself of, try to implement again, right? It's not just like that singular process of, I did a study, I think I learned something, I'm gonna move on. It's really trying to pinpoint, what was I supposed to learn? What was I expecting to learn? Did I learn it? Why or why not? What can I do to make sure that I remember this? What can I do to make sure that I implement this moving forward? It's not just about, oh, I know it now, or realizing that this is something you do. It's also making sure that every time you approach this from now until forever, this is now a changed thing. You've implemented this new information fully, wholeheartedly. And even if you don't, even if you realize like down the line, oh, I completely forgot that thing I learned, it's fine. You've gone through the process of knowing that it exists, of knowing that this is a problem that you have. And now it's so much easier to go back and start doing reference and using photos that are very specifically relevant to this problem that you've deduced is something that you have. So I think this problem of kind of mindlessly making, drawing from reference, mindlessly choosing photos, of kind of using it and then not realizing that you've learned anything is common enough because we're never taught to think of references and studies as like purposeful things that we do. We're taught that this is just something you have to do. So I would have liked to impress upon you the immense role that purpose and intent has when it comes to the sort of impressions that you get and the kind of like education of art. It's really crucial that when you approach learning, you approach it from a place of being very cognizant, right? Because things done without intent, things done without a sense of purpose, a lack of cognition, of checking out when you do it and checking back in and realizing nothing's happening, that's usually what makes people feel like the process of learning how to draw and getting better at it is something that takes way too long. It's too slow, it's too grueling, it's too meaningless. When in reality, I think there's really a lot of ways to make this process very fun and very intuitive and also very engaging, but it requires that you have engaged with it first. And I think the only way that you can do that is to go into studies, go into using photos, selecting photos, and molding this process into something that actually means something, into an event or an activity that actually has the kind of it reflects the thinking that you've put into this, the questions that you want answered, the desires that you want fulfilled when it comes to whatever you want to learn. You have to start from that point in order for everything else after that to matter. So there you go. Will I ever learn to multitask? Absolutely never. I'm thinking of this person just kind of being, well, they're not so crucial to the story that they have a pre-existing thing that they're a part of. So I was thinking that they're more so just an example of a civilian in this place, right? I think they would just sort of be someone you meet in town, who has some level of knowledge about the, like, locale and the inhabitants nearby. She's based off of one of the PC's hometown. So she lives somewhere close. So a lot of her design is kind of partially based on the character design of the player character in question. Sure, I forget. Do links automatically get deleted? Or do we have to approve them? Okay. You can send me a DM or something. Or send Hojo a DM and he can post it. I have drawn not very many. I think I've only drawn like maybe 10 at this point. And a lot of them are not in locales that like they're going to see very soon. So I need to actually work on what they're gonna see like soon as opposed to later, but oh, so cute. Man, I miss this character. I made her for like a random school assignment, but she's so cute. Thank you for making her. Hell yeah. Good luck on your school assignment. Yeah. Here, you brought me ibuprofen. I don't think I've been drinking enough water. Which, no one's surprised by that fact, but... I'm trying to drink more water. I feel like because I've been working, where I work, coffee has become like a much bigger thing in my life than it used to be. And times where I should be drinking water, I'm now drinking coffee, and that's not a very good replacement. Ooh, nice. Is that a one-time thing or a like a salary or a contract, I guess? Cool. That's a good day pay. That's great. Melvin, thank you for the tier 1 sub for 13 months. Thank you so much. We might really need the help. Who knows? Mysterious things happen in mysterious ways. But you got an extra 100 out of it, so...
Thank you.
Ugh. Man, ibuprofen really does work. I have met many people in my life who are like far more like about the holistic medicine, and I'm like, ibuprofen is the only medication that's ever gotten my migraines to stop. I'll live and die by this. It's magical. Trying to study more broke down shapes for anatomy studies and really liked your approach. Do you happen to have more of your studies somewhere to look at because Instagram is extremely scattered? Not really. I don't post those very often if I do them. And more often than not, a lot of my quote unquote studies are often just like wrapped into drawings that I do for fun anyway. So, you're probably looking at a lot of my studies that ended up just being like drawings or illustrations. But I don't post them because I don't really feel like it's something that needs to be posted. I think there's a lot of, I don't know, weirdness that comes with putting stuff out there, and it's nice to keep some things private. So I don't have a lot of my like work that is predominantly just learning out and somewhere publicly. Not too good, just I don't post them. I also want to do like studies that are just studies. I don't like doing studies, so I end up just studying as I'm drawing something else. So
You.
Nice to have an excuse to draw stuff that's very much like me, you know? I don't really do that kind of stuff or this kind of stuff at work, really, so it's nice getting to just take some time and draw this kind of stuff. Oops. Mm, I get your line art this clean without a sketch. I guess in a way, like, yes, I've been doing this for a while, but also, um, I think when people ask me how do you draw it so cleanly or whatever, I think it comes from a place of like, it comes from the experience of drawing a sketch and then trying to clean it up and trying to draw over a sketch and like your lines are uncertain, all that kind of stuff. I think just like by the nature of how I'm drawing, it kind of lends itself, if I do it in a particular way, right? It kind of lends itself towards not needing a lot of that like cleanup, and I'm just being very precise with it. Because I mainly draw through like a form of like improving, I guess. I had none of this character planned out prior to physically drawing the lines. So a lot of it was less about figuring it out and then trying to like communicate. It's like, oh, I put down this line. How do I finish it, right? Do I give her, beads on her hair? Okay, well, I put down this line. Now I have to make it work in. it's drawing a line for her arm and being like, I guess this is where her arm is placed. How do I incorporate the other arm so that it feels like they're doing something? Oh, let me draw some branches in her arms. Maybe she's collecting tree branches or something. And just by trying to take my time with that instead of rushing through something and like, oh, let me just put down this idea and then I'll clean it up later. Instead, it's coming from a place of like, every line I make implies something. It's a decision that I don't fully understand, like, the consequences of. And so every line I'm placing, in this particular way of drawing, right? Every line that I'm placing has to somehow be reincorporated, or it gets erased. And it can lead me towards a place of like, well, maybe if her arm is placed this way, let me try and angle these other lines so that they kind of make this pose or whatever. That being sort of the natural problem solving that occurs like as a result of these decisions. Like, I think that process in itself just lends to this very like slow, precise type way of drawing, I guess. So I think if you're able to approach it from that perspective, a lot of this like cleanliness, I think, just comes from like taking it very slowly. It took me like an hour, like over an hour to draw this, hour 25, right? An hour 30. And that's not including like sketching or doing any of that kind of stuff or planning it. So it's literally just physically drawing each line took me like an hour 30, which is like me not stopping to consider like, oh, how should I do this? How should I plan this? Or like, should she be doing this or wearing this? It is consecutive decision making done very slowly so that every line has a place and a purpose. And so I think once you get to that point, it's just kind of like putting one foot in front of the other kind of thing. You kind of slowly inch your way towards, like, this end state. And it's the reason why I do this, because, like you, Blue, I was very impatient when I was younger. I used to rush through every drawing. I used to try and get it done as fast as possible. And what I realized was that I never allowed anything to just kind of like sit in my mind for too long. I wasn't thinking as I was drawing, and so it ended up being kind of this chaotic mess of like, I'm rushing through this drawing, but I'm not happy with it, but I just want to get it done. And I realized at a certain point that while I like drawing that way, I wasn't happy drawing that way, right? It was comfortable, but I didn't want to do it anymore. And so I started picking up new ways to draw just to try to force myself to slow down. One way that I did that was I picked up a pen and I drew exclusively with pen for like a few years. And that really taught me it put the fear of God in me, really, because you can't, like, trying to correct a pen drawing, you can do it. It doesn't look very good. It's very obvious you made the mistake. And so I got very patient because I had to be, because I didn't want every drawing I did to just be like a mess of, that was a bad idea, I need to do that again. I would just force myself to draw another drawing if I fucked up the one I was working on. And so it made me very cognizant of like everything that I put down. And I think that process of realizing that like I kind of enjoy this improvisational aspect to it of like, hey, I made a mistake, or I drew a line that I didn't want to draw. Why is it a mistake? Why can't I just incorporate this line back into my drawing? And then that kind of, I think, led into this, right? Of just sort of freehanding it, improving as I go, and then coming up with solutions for the problems that I create on the fly is just like, it's fun. It's like a little game that you play every time. The only problem is that I can never be sure of what it's gonna look like. So if anyone asks me to draw something very specific, it's like, I don't know if that's how it's gonna turn out. We're gonna wait and see. In an hour, we'll answer your question about whether or not it ended up looking anything like the original intent, whatever that might have been. Does line art in Photoshop stay clean when using liquify or resizing things? No, it's not going to, because in Photoshop at least, you're never unless you're working with a vector, but I don't think vector lines can be liquefied. So you're working with just straight pixels, which will always be kind of blurry. They'll lose a little bit of that like crispness when you liquefy or resize it. However, like if you're drawing large and resizing it down, it will be much better than if you make it bigger later. So I always recommend drawing larger than you expect to, just overall. Liquify also does a relatively good job, depending on how much you change things, right? I think it does a relatively good job of not completely destroying the quality of the image, but I think it really kind of depends on what your expectations are. For the most part, I'm okay with a little bit of blurriness if it means that it's in a much better place. Liquify is absolutely one of my favorite tools. It has saved my life so many times. So I'm willing to exchange that in order to use Liquify. And in my experience, at least, I haven't found it to be that much worse. Depending on how much you change. Is solo drawing something worth practicing, and how should we practice it? I think it's a very good skill. I don't like doing it, but I have used it whenever I needed to. Because I think, and I will hydrate, I think silhouette drawing does a really good job of teaching you things that or forcing you to think in a certain way that you might not normally have to consider. It is forcing you to think in larger shapes. It's forcing you to consider it's forcing you to consider a very abstract base elements of objects, right? There are times where we are so focused on what we already know about something that we are unable to allow ourselves to imagine it in any other way. So when you're drawing humans, sometimes it's so easy to get wrapped up in what you've already considered, like, or what you already know about drawing people and about drawing the human body, that you refuse to accept that there are other ways to approach it, other ways to stretch proportions, right? People that struggle with kind of exaggerating things sometimes struggle because they feel like there's a right way to do it, and leaving it scares them. It's true for all things. Drawing in silhouette helps you get over that barrier by forcing you to basically not be able to see it as this thing that you're already very familiar with. It forces you to associate it with shapes, with forms, with negative space and positive space, right? And so it really throws things into this like very abstract kind of perspective, and it's very helpful to learn how to design through that, to learn how to draw through that. And I think practicing it is trying to approach silhouette design the way that you approach everything else, which is trying to imbue a sense of intent and purposefulness within every shape or line that you make. I think a lot of people are very lazy when it comes to silhouettes because they think the point of it is just to make some shapes and with black color or something like that. But there is something very, very difficult about communicating through silhouette, because it's a lot about allowing the brain to fill in the details. But when you just kind of put random triangles and squares and shapes in it, like, you might think you're communicating things, but you're communicating absolutely nothing. And it forces you to really consider the impacts of various elements that you put in and how that's going to provide people the opportunity to invent within the silhouette, right? Because when you give someone a silhouette, they're using all of the possible context clues to understand what you're showing them. If you don't take care in designing those elements, it's fundamentally pointless to look at the silhouette because it's just a bunch of shapes. And I think people get very loose and lazy with it because you see it sometimes where they'll allow the lasso tool of Photoshop to kind of like drive them forward, right? The brush that they use is very obvious. If you use like a hard round brush in Photoshop, like I can tell when you use that. And it was something that very difficult for me to get over because I don't have the patience for silhouettes, but it's crucial because you have no other way of communicating when you're doing a silhouette. So you have to be very precise. You have to be very purposeful about the lines, or not the lines, but the forms that you put down to describe even the smallest things, right? Having a pocket break the silhouette of an arm or a leg is incredibly important detail if it's important for the design of the character. If it's something that's going to break the silhouette, it's important for people to know, and therefore it has to be very particularly designed. And so it's taking the time to be very deliberate about all these things. It's taking the time to really craft the silhouette in a way that not only communicates kind of like a good structure, right? I think structure typically is the first thing to go when people start doing silhouette stuff, is they forget that like there's still a skeleton in there, there's still muscles and stuff if you're doing humans. Structure typically goes first. Make sure your structure is working, right? Make sure that your limbs are correctly proportioned for the body, even if you're pushing out, proportions and stuff. Regardless of how different the proportions are, it doesn't matter if structurally it is not sound. So making sure that your proportions are there, that your structure is there, and then being very attentive to those details, right? Attentive to the things that are defining the silhouette, right? If hair is breaking the silhouette, make sure that people know that it's hair, or know that it's a hat, or know that it's like a braid, right? These things are going to really depend on the shapes that you use. So don't just use diamonds for a braid. Very specifically pick out pieces of hair so it looks kind of messy. Make the individual braid elements slightly different sizes so that it feels like it's hand done. pull it out of the character's like pose so that people see like, oh, that's like a braid that's coming out, versus like, I think that's some vague second neck that they gave them. I don't know why there's like a random bubbly thing next to the head, right? You have to make everything much more clear, much more well defined. And that's kind of like the basis of it, because you can practice it however way you want, but the important thing is that you are recognizing what becomes more important now that you've chosen this method of conveying ideas. It's the inner details that loses prominence, and it becomes so much more important that these outer lines, that this kind of like the breaking of a silhouette, the changes to the form, right? The things that define like a jacket or wrinkles or hair or details like glasses or a hat. The posing becomes way more important, because as soon as we lose those inner details, no one's gonna care that your like arms are folded. No one's gonna care that it has like a belt. If we can't see the belt from the silhouette, none of us are gonna care. So it becomes so much more crucial to be very attentive to the details you're putting down, the colors and the forms that are creating those details, and making sure that everything that's a part of it is exactly what you want to convey. Because as soon as you get a little lazy and as soon as you get a little loose, you're going to basically break the foundations of your drawing. And as much as it's nice that you did some silhouettes, if it doesn't ultimately accomplish conveying your ideas, it didn't accomplish anything at all. So the pure, like, I think some people assume silhouettes are just like the go-to way to do stuff, where it's like, oh, it's just good to do it, it's good to learn. It's absolutely worth practicing, primarily because of what it forces you to do. If you just do it, but you're loose about it, you're lazy about it, it's about as useful as having not done it at all. And that's why it's scary and I don't do it. But it's a very important skill to have. You should learn it if you can. struggle with that a lot still. Like you might have noticed in this one, I took away some of the shadows because it was starting to get in the way of like uh having her face still be like the focus. Even though like right now it's not super successful because you look at her hands and then her face, but the shadows are really great for creating depth, but like it is very distracting because it is just like this pocket of color, right? So I think it's important to realize like what are you trying to get people to focus on. It's usually the face if you're drawing a character, and try to make the kind of pit shadows just a way to set things apart from each other so that it helps communicate layers of things or just like two things interacting with each other, like a braid sitting on like fur, right? Having that kind of information is very useful because otherwise would just be like it would otherwise just be two lines on top of each other, not very three-dimensional. And having it in those areas, very useful. Once you start putting it in just because, that's when it becomes a little bit less I guess like designed. It's I think it's very important that it does not come at the cost of readability, right? As soon as you put a bunch of shadows in, it sometimes feels like everything has a level of importance to it. It feels like everything that you're looking at is meant to be popping out to the front because it does that. And you usually have to tone it back a little bit. So I don't really know how to balance it off the top of my head beyond like avoiding areas that I think are meant to fade a little bit, and focusing more on areas that have focal points that I need to emphasize, right? Like faces, or even just emphasizing depth and overlapping parts. Because like as much as maybe this was too much, I think it was very important that I show the difference between her hands and her arms versus like the branches versus maybe like other parts of her. So it's separating these elements where things around her head maybe don't really need to be separated as much because it's all kind of one cohesive form. So basically I'm winging it every single time and I don't know the answer to your question. I can't draw things in perspective. I always get it wrong. I get it wrong all the time. I'm feeling good. Although, I will probably end at normal time, around 10, just to have time to work on session 0 stuff. To hydrate this guy. Unfortunately, I believe he is a little past hydration. Do you believe me if I said I'm also making this up as I go? Like, sometimes I'm like, I know how this works. And then other times I'm like, fuck if I know how this works. We draw a lot of lines and then people are like, yeah, sure. That's the real trick, really. Hi, Scat. Hey, Cyan. There's a bunch of stray cats where I live now. I always hear them outside. They're always fighting with each other. And I'm like, okay, like, but do one of you guys want to come inside? But it's half a joke and half not a joke. Hi, Jay. Welcome, welcome. Thank you, Gonzo. Well, the singing tournament for the cats, they are very loud. Especially when they fight, it's always like the most amount of cat I've ever heard when they fight. So there's pretty ratty street cats somewhere out here. Look, don't talk to me about Cats the Musical, okay? Like, if there is anything that I have stopped being ashamed of people knowing, is that Cats the Musical is by far one of my core memories as a human being. And if someone gets me started on Cats the Musical, I will not stop talking about it until I prove to you that the fact that that and Les Mis, both musicals, got put in or got given to the same like criminal of a director for the film adaptations proves that we do not live in a meritocracy. I cannot believe that the two musicals that have defined my life and my childhood were given to the same man. It's like a war crime. It is absolutely. It is. It is probably the greatest wrong ever done to me personally. No, it's not rant time. I will not talk about this anymore. I have no, I won't, because I will stop drawing and we will only speak about this, and I will not do that. And in fact, instead, you should go watch the what is it? Sideways YouTube channel about the Cats musical and Les Mis. Both of them are very good. They're both very long, and they describe in better terms how much of a crime the movies were. Thank you. This is another, maybe not NPC, just another character from my D&D campaign that I'm making. Good question. I really do struggle with tatters quite a bit. I think it's about trying to. I mean, it's very similar to designing shapes, right? You're trying not to have too many consistent shapes, right? Like, so these are very equally spaced. You don't want to have too many consistent shapes. You don't want to have consistent heights, consistent widths, right? So when you're trying to draw like a tatter, you're trying to come up with like a variety of ways that this like fabric can sort of tear. It helps to do some research. I don't do enough research. I should do more research. But then also, like, you know, you notice that all of these are the same length, right? I should make one of these much longer than the others. This is a very consistent shape that I have, so I should smooth out one of these, maybe. Understanding that, you know, fabric, it doesn't tear in a circle, it kind of tears in sort of like an arc shape, and then it's sort of the fraying of the fabric that creates that sort of like circular shape. That's how it normally happens, right? It's more so these like vertical seam rips versus, or rips in the threading or the weaving. So you're not really getting these like pure circles, you're getting more often like normal rips, but with maybe exaggerated forms. So it's like balancing those two things and then kind of trying to create like a pleasing silhouette on top of that. At least that's how I approach it. And then everything else is just fuck it with ball. Although I don't really know where that phrase came from. Is that like a I'm afraid to ask. At this point I'm afraid to ask. I've seen it so many times. So a lot of people say it and I'm like, I don't know where that came from. And at this point, I don't think I will ever know. Do you have any advice for creating characters? Like, how do you even begin? That's a loaded question. You know, I think to an extent, right, I wonder if it's hard to answer the question because I think there are degrees to which you care about this kind of information. For like, because like the general person can design any character wearing whatever kind of clothes they want, and that's a character. It's still a character. Or you can spend your career making it like your job to know basic anthropology, basic fashion history, right? Or not even basic, to have that be a part of your day-to-day of learning and researching and all that kind of stuff. That can also be your job, right? And that can also be the way that you create characters. So I think it's really about like, are you truly starting from zero? In which case, like, I don't think a process is helpful before you've fallen in love with the idea of just creating something, creating a person. To really create a character, I think from step zero is to kind of just put a bunch of things together and be like, okay, what does this look like, right? What are they wearing? What are these random details that I have for them, right? And then as you get comfortable with just like putting things together, then you start considering like, what does it mean when they wear this thing, right? What does it mean that they cut their hair this way? What does it say about them that they dress in this manner? And that's really the direction for character design, right? That's the place you want to go. It's beginning to question the very reason why someone dresses the way they do. It's a human question. And I'm only talking about human characters, not necessarily monsters, but every character works, right? Like, the reasons for which they look the way they do, they act the way they do, their personality, their facial features. On a human, like a normal, real human, we don't get to decide how we look, or like how we, like, if everything about us matches our identity or our personality, but we strive to do those things, right? We strive to dress the way that we feel. We strive to act the way that we want people to see us. We style ourselves. We walk and talk and gesticulate, or even just kind of like idle in poses and in ways that convey who we are. Characters are that, but plus so much, plus 100, because you can make their physical features also match those same things, but the philosophy is the same, right? When you're creating characters, you're essentially trying to convey a collection of ideas, whether or not that's like who this character is, what this character does, where does this character, like, what world does this character belong to, what genre, what aesthetic, what personality type, what, kind of identity do they have or pretend to have, right? Like, these are human questions that we then bring into that conversation of like, okay, well, now let me pick an outfit that follows that. Let me pick a hairstyle that follows that, a face that follows that, a body type that follows that train of thought. And then once you get to a certain point, you realize how all these things are very much just the logic of it. But then you get to a certain point where you realize, like, does it matter? Is it important that things matter in this instance? Why can't a character just be cool? Just draw, like, why can't I just draw a character wearing something, doing something, and it's all fun and fair? And that's where character design becomes this wide open expanse again that it was when it started. So that's why it's hard to give advice about creating characters, because you start off being like, I'm just gonna put a bunch of junk together and then it's fine. And then you get to a point where, like, things must have meaning and logic behind them and research and value. And then you get to a point where you're just like, fuck it, I don't give a shit. And I'm in the stage of fuck it, I don't give a shit. But then also loosely like, I do give a shit. I do care. I do care about the why, because I think it's genuinely important that the why is considered. I think that's what's really interesting about humans. I think that's what's interesting about anthropology. I think that's what makes humans so special. That's why I like drawing characters, because there's always a way to wrap the why back into the equation, even if your design fundamentally doesn't come from a place of research, doesn't come from historical dress, doesn't come from any kind of grand idea for a cool concept. Not every character I draw is cool in concept, it's just cool to me. And so I dilly-dally between the barriers of that experience. But for the most part, when I'm drawing these things, it's fuck it, I don't give a shit. Have I been? I've been good. How have you been? I wonder how you decide what details to use from your research for your characters. I feel like I overthink the design. Yeah, I mean, overthinking your designs is a very common problem, and I think the only way to resolve that is to kind of learn from experience, right? I think using the amount of like research that makes it into the design, usually not that much directly. There are times where the project is a lot more historical, so I will try to implement more, but like when it's just kind of me drawing a character that has touch points, cultural touch points, I try not to directly reference things, but take the essence of what it is, the importance of it, the reason it exists, and apply that same logic, but don't necessarily carry over those same details, right? Just because they embroider like in a very specific style doesn't mean that I carry that over, but I carry over the significance of embroidery, and how they go about it and what dyes that they use and the shapes that they use and what they were able to accomplish, right? There's a lot of technology involved with that. Is my world in the same space of that kind of technological understanding? It's incorporating these ideas that are fundamental to human history so that you can then inform your own decisions in your designs to make it feel much more realistic, much more grounded, because these are things, technologies, spaces that we have been accomplishing for years, right? So that's typically how I approach utilizing research. Is I don't try to carry things over one-to-one. I try to understand why this piece that I've added to my board is relevant, is important, is necessary, is inspirational. And that's the point. It's inspiration. Reference coming into play more heavily, you lean into that when it's important to do so, right? But for the most part, like, I try to use my reference a lot more as the process of learning that information, very important. The actual physical look of something, less important. I want to spend more time developing that look myself versus taking that directly from something else. As far as overthinking the design, again, I think that's just kind of something you have to give yourself time to realize. Where do you tend to over-design, right? I found that I tend to get way too detailed and do that way too fast, and I don't leave open areas of rest because I feel like I should put something there, but it's oftentimes a lot more pleasing to put nothing there when I have more details elsewhere, right? So I've attempted to slow down a little bit, spend more time looking at the piece as a whole before I decide, like, yeah, I'll put this detail right here or something like that. But it's really understanding like your own habits when it comes to designing things, and letting yourself like take some time away from it to be like, does it need more? Do I feel like it's missing something, or do I feel like it has too much? Taking time to evaluate that throughout the process is going to help you then like not hyper focus and not hyper fixate on oh, I should put in more because more is better, right? No, I haven't really touched Titania. She just is where she is right now. How do you control your brushstrokes so well? Do you have to warm up to it? Yeah, I mean every drawing is a warm up, right? With the time it took me to do this one, I feel like I was sufficiently warmed up. But yeah, I mean, I tend to just kind of start drawing and roll with it. If I don't end up liking it, that's cool, it's fine. to be a character designer for games like you, and I have many friends who want to become a concept artist, but we have all been scared and unmotivated since the whole AI thing started. Can you tell to a student so we have some hope in all this? I get it. Like, it's pretty scary and demoralizing to know that there are quite a few people who do not respect the work that you are proud to do. All I can say is that there is still an industry here. There's still an industry that needs artists, that needs new people to come in and give them new ideas. Games can be made with AI, but good games will never be. And I think it's because I think humans understand intrinsically that there's a very special kind of chaos that only really human creatives can introduce. And so I am not afraid of my job being replaced, because I know that the people who do value my work, the people that have a responsibility to value my work, must realize and recognize the very thing that I provide them. There is no chance for technology right now or today or in the next decade to be able to replicate it. Could it try its best? Absolutely. The people who create it can absolutely try their best. But I think there is a reality in which they have to realize the real part of my job that I do every day on their behalf is predominantly due to the fact that I'm human and that I can communicate socially in a way that I understand the nuances and the unsaid things, and that part of production is just as valuable as me being able to do my job well and being a good technical artist, right? So the people that do value our work, there are quite a few who work in those positions, but there are quite a few people who realize that there is nothing quite nearly as special as the work that artists are capable of doing, because we've spent our lives making this our priority. And so I have absolute faith that there will be an industry still for you and me for the coming years. I don't think it is wise for me to say you don't have to worry about it. But the fact of the matter is that we cannot afford to lose prospective minds, prospective students, and prospective professionals to this too early. I think it is a great shame that there are professionals currently, very anti-AI people, who don't factor that into the messages that they put out, because I think scaring new students away from fully devoting themselves to art is a shame. We've lost probably so many creatives who could have potentially changed this landscape for a lot of us, and I think it is inherently our responsibility as professionals to make sure people know that it is also our job to make sure this industry lasts in time for students to also be able to participate. And I will also never tell a student in the face of all this stuff. I'll never tell a student to not be an artist, because I don't think there is another job for me. I can't imagine that there aren't any other people where that's not also the same. So I love my job. I love the work that I do. I love the people that I work with. There are some people that I work with who do not respect me in the same way, and that is fine. However, it would be me lying through my teeth to say it is not something to keep an eye on, but it'd also be a lie for me to say that that this job is not worth doing in every respect. So it is absolutely something that we have to keep in mind. But I love the work that I do. It is the lifeblood of my world, and if that means having to make sure that this job exists for every student that follows, that is hoping to join, then that is my responsibility, as well as everyone else who works with me, or works in my field. But I don't know, I can't say that it's not scary. All I can say is that I still think that regardless of how scary it is, this job is also the best thing that's ever happened to me. I absolutely adore what I do. And it is a shame that there are quite a few people who do not understand that I do not need nor want something else to do it for me. Annual range, so it depends on what job you have, right? If as for concept art, general range for a junior concept artist is between about like 50, this is in US, right? In the US, about 40 to 50k to about 90k USD, right? So 40,000, 50,000 to $90,000 per year is about classic USD. The pay range of a junior concept artist. And middle to senior middle kind of like in between senior and junior, just your average concept artist will most likely be making anywhere from 70,000 to 115,000, and then senior concept artists will be making anywhere from 100,000 to like 160,000 a year, and then principal and art director above will make more than that. 50k to 90k is quite a range, yes, because there are a variety of studios. 90k is closer to what AAA studios would pay. 50k is 40 to 50k is probably closer to what an indie studio would pay. And that's an indie studio that already has millions in funding, right? That's not your average like one dude in a basement. That's like a what is it? That's probably closer to what like that game company would pay for a junior artist, right? Not saying they pay like 50k. I'm just saying like an indie company that has games out but is not raking in the billions per year. There's a bottom tier to where that's like about 40 to 50k. Supergiant pays really well because of the place they are, being in San Francisco and being predominantly filled with leads on their teams, right? Supergiant outsources a lot, but they everyone in-house is basically a lead on their teams. So I think they would still have been paid quite a lot. I think base pay probably would have been closer to 90k for any individual that doesn't have a senior or principal or lead, right? But they don't keep very many people in-house, and that is a very particular decision that they made. And being in San Francisco means that they do not have, or in the Bay Area, right? That means that they do not have the ability to pay their employees any lower than that. Yeah, I think it's very important to be transparent about pay expectations. But I will say, this is again very specifically working in the United States, very specifically working in California, although these rates I think are relatively common across the states, especially the junior to mid range. Like 40 to 50k upwards of 90k I think encompasses most of the expectations. There are places that will pay 90k to mid-tier artists. Senior to principal artists will generally make at least 100k because of the roles that because of the jobs that kind of come as a part of their umbrella, right, of their role. But I think it's more general to find jobs between 40k to 90k for your average concept artist. QA never gets treated well. Like, QA has always suffered, I think because of its old reputation for having been the only way people got into games was if you did QA first for a little bit, right? Especially game designers, like you usually did some level of QA before you even got close to designing for anything. I don't know, I don't think that's the case anymore, and QAs should absolutely be paid more and credited better because, like, our games do not exist without them, right? Or they do, and it's terrible. Quality assurance. But they have always been paid dirt, which is crazy. I do not know the base pay for graphic designers. Yes. Again, preface, only in the United States, maybe potentially California, though I think these are the rates common across the entirety of the United States, especially in areas of like tech circles or generally like mid-size, single A, double A, triple A, and also specifically concept artists working in games. I have no idea what concept artists working in film or animation or anything like that get. This is specifically my experience. I do not. There are quite a few concept artists that consider 3D a very essential part of doing concept, but I draw characters specifically for very certain types of games. I don't get hired for the games that require me to know 3D. That being said, I think learning how to do 3D is quite good for 2D artists. I think we frequently forget the things that we are able to get away with structurally that 3D artists cannot, and so where we would kind of get a little bit more lazy about structure and depth and all that kind of stuff, working in 3D really helps you understand form in the way it's supposed to be understood. So I think actually learning 3D is a fantastic thing if you can take a class on sculpting or doing 3D in any way. Very good. Would I want to do it? Nope. but I enjoyed my 3D classes that I had to take in college. I thought they were very helpful. Do you have preferences to something on using Clip Studio instead of Photoshop? I've just been enjoying drawing with a very particular brush on Clip Studio. No other reason. Clip Studio is pretty good for base coloring, although I do hate that it doesn't like fill in behind the lines, so that's probably my like least favorite part about Clip Studio, but does do base coloring very quickly with all of its like layer features where you can like paint bucket based on like a reference layer. Very fun. But I pretty much just use it for sketching and base coloring. I do everything else in Photoshop or Paint Tool Sai. Jojo, I feel like we should make a Nightbot command where it's just like, if ever you ask a question that's like, why are you using X program? And the Nightbot just responds, because I felt like it. With how much people wonder every single time I switch a program. Do you ever do your rendered work on stream? I sometimes do. Not recently, because I haven't really felt like painting in a while. But maybe if I ever feel like painting again, I will do that on stream. Hey, Dan Dudes. Hi, Sparrow. Thank you for coming. I mean, we're about to end anyway, so you're all good. You. Oh, cool. Hi, Happy. Sorry you came right at the end. You were just about to end. Well, thank you for coming. Dragon, thank you for the Twitch Prime sub. Thank you so much. Okay. Well, it is now 10, which means that I will end the stream here. Let me see. Do I never use analog traditional materials in my line of work nowadays? Not often, no. I had 2 characters done, yay! About as productive as I always am. So yeah, thank you guys for coming. Thank you guys for asking questions. Always happy to talk about art stuff. It's my thing, so thank you for coming by and asking stuff. And thank you for just hanging out with me on this Friday. First, you know, kind of, I'm trying to maintain the streak, so I'm glad that I can stream this week, hoping to stream next week as well. So thank you guys for sticking around, for keeping me company, and I hope you guys have a lovely weekend, have a lovely week until I see you next, and that's it, I guess. I will talk to you all next week.